All right. Episode number 5, Still Mid Podcast. My name's Matt. That's Wade. And we have our special guest today, Daniel Joseph Sprague, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did I get it all right?
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. Dan is a really good friend of mine. I've known him, man, we became really good friends when we went up to UMD.
Mm-hmm.
Go Bulldogs.
Yep.
And, well, I guess when we've done now this 5th episode, each time we start out and we talk about a couple things. One, we want to thank Bolton and Mink for having us here.
Yep.
You always remember that, Wade. And
Absolutely.
I finally remembered it this time. Is there anybody else we got to thank for big coffee cups or anything else?
Big shout out to Pelican Coolers.
Yes.
The best. Tony, appreciate you. And I think it's Bolton Mink Studios on the gram, if we're not banned. But I think it's Bolton Mink Studios. So big shout out to Bolton Mink.
You might be banned.
I know. Soon, right?
Yeah.
Soon.
Well, we'll see how this goes.
Right, exactly.
All right. So what we do is we start out, obviously, thank a few people, and then we get a little bit of a background. So, Dan, obviously, a little bit of an icebreaker, I guess. But tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and kind of where you got to. Well, eventually, we're going to talk about real estate investing.
Yeah, 1,000-foot level. Grew up in Mankato. Went up to Duluth for college, and migrated back to Mankato after my...
Where'd you go to high school at?
Mankato East, class of 05,
Okay.
same as you.
Yep.
Went up to Duluth and made it about a year and came back to Mankato because I was getting good grades and stuff like that, but college just didn't seem like it was for me, and my parents then, after a year, convinced me to go back. Spent a few more years in Duluth, graduated from Duluth, and came back down here again, migrated.
What'd you get a degree in?
Finance,
Okay.
I think. Yeah. I learned a lot about real estate up there, which we'll get to. I learned
Yep.
more, I don't want to sound dramatic, but on the streets than I did at school, I think.
Yeah.
In the streets.
Yeah, I said I didn't want to get
Duluth.
dramatic, Wade.
Yeah.
Uptown Duluth.
Yeah. But no, then I came back down here and got into, your regular get a job kind of mode. And during that time, got into real estate investing, which we can get into, and met my wife, Jaci, who I married 5 years ago. And we have 2 kids now, and then boy and a girl, 4 and 2. And we have one on the way due in April now. And I live in Madison Lake. I'm actually neighbors with this guy now. And I still have a corporate world job. And I do a lot of real estate investing on the side, and I think that's kind of what we're here to talk about. And my life is my family and my kids, and then it's real estate investing and hockey and fishing.
And fishing. There you go.
Fishing.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So, what turned you on to real estate investing? Was it reading? Was it something you saw? A mentor you had? Mom, dad?
So it was, well, my parents dabbled in real estate investing. They have a couple properties around town. So it was there. The seed was always there.
Because your dad's owned some laundromats.
And then
your
he's
grandpa
got, yep,
did
my
as well.
Yep, my grandparents started some laundromats in Mankato back in the 70s when they came here from South Dakota. My dad still happens to have one laundromat to this day. So the seed was
Grandpa Don, right?
Grandpa
With
Don,
the
yep.
super sweet Glastron.
Yep, we can get into that too. There's a lot there.
That'll be later. That's, I don't know, probably 25 at least minutes from now, but we'll get there.
Yeah. So where did it come from? It was a mixture of reading and paying $425 for a bedroom in Duluth that I found the value that I was trading for the $525 or $425 a month. There wasn't the value there. It was just a matter of it was near campus and it was a place to sleep. And that just started things brewing in my head, like, how is this even possible? And then I ran into the author Robert Kiyosaki, which a lot of people have heard of, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That book absolutely changed my life. I read everything I could get my hands on by him. And that was probably when I was 20. And I just kind of on a whim bought my first property, I think when I was 21. And the rest is kind of history. So it was a mixture of kind of seeing the market. The market was kind of obvious in Duluth. It's just buy a house and rent it out to kids. That was how I understood it at that time. But I was like, seems like a lot of money for this, for what I'm getting. And then when I read Kiyosaki, at that point I kind of knew I wanted to be entrepreneurial, but I could not figure out a product that I could make and sell for a profit. It's like, and my professors or people I talk to like you or anybody up there would say, you just need to solve a problem. I remember talking to all my friends, we just need to solve a problem, and then a business will come out of that. Couldn't think of anything. I had friends around me starting websites and stuff like that. Social media was getting big. Had some friends start some social websites and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know where it is for me. I can't figure it out. And when I read Kiyosaki, that's what changed everything.
So what about Kiyosaki changed? Like, what was your mindset prior, and what was your mindset post reading Kiyosaki? And you got to throw Napoleon Hill in there too.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill was a
big one, but
big influence on my life.
the business is called N Hill Enterprises.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah, one of them.
Another
yeah.
one's called Alchemy, which is another that's from the Alchemist and Pablo Coelho and stuff
Yep.
like that. But honestly, Kiyosaki. This is what's weird about Kiyosaki. The book is not really about real estate investing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what a lot of people derive out of it. And honestly, what I got out of Kiyosaki was what I would describe as kind of a sheepish mindset beforehand and not knowing what I want to do with my life. And I feel like when I finished probably the third book by Kiyosaki, I was like, I'm going to buy houses. I don't know if I'm going to do it in Duluth or Mankato. Probably Mankato because I have some roots there. And it just took me from what am I going to do to this is what I'm going to do. And I just haven't stopped since, which is, to me, when you're purpose-driven like that and you know exactly what you want to do, the world kind of gets out of your way. So
it was a total mindset change.
Nothing about me really changed. I just decided what I wanted to do with my life,
Yeah.
kind of.
Well,
So that's how I got into it.
I witnessed that just from being really good friends with you from freshman year onward. And the person you are today was much different than the person that I met freshman year.
Yeah.
In very good ways. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that, or you weren't cool or good or anything like that. We had a lot of fun, but I think that having that purpose and being entrepreneurial and being willing to go out and find the information, read it, and be disciplined. I mean, I remember going to your apartment in Mankato, the first one. I think you owned the building and you lived up top, and the bottom one was rented or something like that. And your whole bookcase, like your whole apartment was basically bare except for a bed and maybe the bathroom, but your bookcase was full.
Yeah. Well, that's straight out of Jim Rohn stuff where he says, it's dated. He says, look at any $250,000 house, they have libraries in them. Mm-hmm. In today's world, you'd say, look at any $500,000 house and they have libraries in them. And,
of course.
And so it's like, that was I had a 350 square foot apartment, but I was living there for free because of the tenants downstairs, providing them good housing, not just like exploiting them or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And the bookcase was there and just kept my head down, kept going. That was the second place that I bought too.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember the first one now.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I even helped you maybe mow the yard or something once there.
Well, part of the master plan was you were supposed to move into that place with me when we moved back to Duluth, and that really screwed with my plans when you didn't.
Then I moved Lisa, or then I met Lisa, and she was way hotter.
It's an easy choice. No offense.
I remember that phone call. I'm like, hey, Sprague, kind of sorry, but this girl's really hot. She likes me.
She saw me being a drummer in a band.
You know she's going to watch this.
Yeah. I don't think she's watched any of them.
What's funny is I don't think anybody's spouse has watched any of these. Like my wife is like, oh, that's great, thank you. So anyway, we need to make this food for dinner or do some laundry, help out.
Yep.
Glad you talked to your friends. That's really cute. We have stuff to do here. But no, I mean, if you have to pick between living with, him over to my right or Lisa, I'm sure you hemmed and hawed over the decision.
I screwed his plan up, but it looks like it's
my bank account said about $100 and my credit card balance said about $2,000 at that point, so that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, you're like, oh my God.
Wait a minute, I just signed up for this $900 a month mortgage, and you're not gonna move in with me?
Sorry.
I thought we were friends. Now we'll never be neighbors and live on a lake together. You wrecked everything, Lisa.
That was such a dick move. Sorry.
But no, we move on from that, but it's that started my discipline. I mean, there's no mistakes, only lessons is definitely a credo of my life, and I went on Craigslist and found some characters, and they lived with me, and it's just that's how I started to learn about it, and it was a great first step, and I still own the house, and it's still a great piece of investment for me.
So this is how much of this is, I think, and I apologize, maybe back up a little bit. So you had, instead of diving right in and doing something completely on your own right off the bat, this is more your part-time becoming more of your full-time. Is that fairly accurate? Or
Back
not?
then?
Well, from starting originally is completely like part-time, and now moving towards is that your ultimate goal, is to kind of get to a place where
Yes.
you can then just manage your properties?
Yes, I have a number in mind, and that's defined as financial freedom for me. And I still am fully committed to I have a corporate world job. I do mortgages, and I love doing that and helping people buy houses. And right now, helping a lot of people refinance. And I'm definitely doing it on the side. But yeah, it just keeps evolving. And the plan is for someday for it to be successful enough that I can just do that and have a lot of freedom to hang out with my family or go fishing or do whatever I want. Is definitely the plan.
So, and chime in, Wade, too. I don't mean to take all the questions, but
No, yeah,
so,
please, Joe.
So what is the draw of investing in real estate?
That's a broad question. There's a
We've
lot of
talked about all these answers. That's why it's hard
Yeah.
for me to.
Yeah,
Yeah, no
talk about
problem.
this, but-
I mean, I think for me, for folks that watch this, there's a point where the same age or the same group or the same mindset, the same folks tend to read the same stuff, and so like Rich Dad Poor Dad, like that book resonates with me.
Have you read it?
I have, along with like The Millionaire Next Door and all those kinds of books. 'Cause they were really popular and coming out about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So for guys like us or people that have a similar mindset, those books are like, oh yeah, I have that, I read that, or I like when I moved into my new house, I found my first copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad. So can we go back to those books and talk about those?
Absolutely.
You just don't go and like walk down the street and I'm like in my mind's eye, I'm picturing, Daniel Joseph Sprague
Yep.
has like shoulder length hair and he's like goes to the library or someplace and like this Rich Dad Poor Dad book is like glowing on the shelf and you're like, there's my destiny. So like you find these books through something. Like somebody goes, hey, you should read that. And you go, okay. And you start down that path. So what does that book, like, how'd you find it? And what is Rich Dad Poor Dad?
First, how I found it, two questions there. First, how I found it, it was through a person I knew. It was actually the guy that originally got me into bass fishing, which is a sickness I have now.
And I have had, not just now, but have had.
Have had. And I was talking with him, and he actually gave me a copy of not Rich Dad Poor Dad, but it's basically the sequel to Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's called What the Rich Invest in That the Poor and Middle Class Do Not, which is kind of a controversial label maybe now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
he gave me that book.
It is.
He gave me that book when I was in college in Duluth, and I bet it sat on my bookshelf because I just hadn't made a decision to start doing anything with my life at that point. It sat on my bookshelf for at least a year and a half.
Yep.
We were busy playing foosball and
And
watching
then-
wild hockey.
But
and
then
the Bulldogs.
I remember sitting in the back of somebody's car one day on the way home from Duluth. I wasn't driving, and I brought it with me just because I was just stuck in one of those things where it's just like, what am I going to do? And I read like half of it on the way home from Duluth to Mankato, and I remember exactly the car I was in, and that's just when I started to get it. And then the second question, that's how I got to it.
Yep.
I actually read Rich Dad Poor Dad second.
Yep.
But the idea behind Rich Dad Poor Dad, I don't know. It's a lot of people call it controversial. For me, it defined the difference between assets and liabilities, which sounds really simplistic, but and it is. But the way he talks about it kind of changed how I think about things. The popular one is that he defines your primary residence as a liability instead of an asset because it's taking money out of your pocket. But really, just in general, it's an investing book that it really makes it simple, and the wording, like the print is big and it reads really quick, and the chapters are, and the stories he tells, even though some of them are a little fabricated, are really easy to follow and they're fun to follow. And that the title of the book is Rich Dad Poor Dad. The first story is the idea that he has two dads, and it kind of brings you in right away, and it just teaches you about simple things about investing, but it just did it in a different way than every other stock book that you could pick up off a library shelf.
And doesn't he talk about his biological dad as one that works, he just works for security constantly. All he wants is security, and he never takes a risk. And he's always just, doing the traditional put away your money in a 401k or whatever it is. And he just keeps going through that grind and never attains the financial freedom, correct? Am I getting that along the...
And that's Poor Dad.
That's Poor Dad.
Yep.
And then the other Rich Dad is the guy who, like you're talking about, is creating assets.
Yes.
He's and one of the things they talk about is debt, good debt and bad debt.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what they talk about there.
Oh, that's the whole crux of why I think real estate investing is incredible, which we'll get to later. But a good debt, I mean, it's very simple. Good debt is debt that other people pay for you. So if you own a car and your payment is $300 a month, it's a liability. But if you start driving for Uber and you bring in $325 a month, now it's an asset.
Yep.
That's the general concept of that. Bad debt is exactly what you would think it would. It'd be
Motorcycles,
It'd be
ATVs.
going to buy a motorcycle because you got emotional and you thought you needed it, kind of thing. And his whole thing is, you build assets. He's not saying you can't buy a Porsche or a motorcycle. He's saying build assets that'll pay for them, which is the foundation of the whole thing. So, yeah, the poor dad is the, I think he works in the school system, but he's very highly educated and stuff like that, doesn't take risks. And the rich dad is non-high school educated for the purpose of that story. This is, people tear him apart online because it's a fabricated story, but, building convenience stores and different kinds of real estate development and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I think in the late 90s, that book probably came out somewhere around there. Mid 90s, late 90s is when it first came into, like my view, like my memory.
yeah.
And my Uncle Ed is like a hardcore entrepreneur, like third generation. His grandparents had like the Midas shop in town.
Okay.
And his dad took it over. So Sparky and Homer and Ed, right? And they were this kind of passed on this mindset from grandpa to dad to my Uncle Ed, who's probably in his early 50s now. So he's the one that showed me this book. And also with, like the Millionaire Next Door book, right around the same time. And like from where I grew up, we were poor. We were borderline food stamps, which I've said on the podcast before. I still accept donations. So this
Pelican, coolers, go right ahead.
Right, exactly. So Pelican, if you're out there. So like the whole mindset and idea of it, that's what's most fascinating to me, because I didn't grow up with people that owned things, that didn't, they didn't own businesses. And he's my uncle. He married my aunt. So he's an uncle-in-law. Like my family, we didn't own right? Mom worked for the state, stepdad, like my dad sold shoes. So the idea that you could go and buy something or buy a property or buy a house, that didn't happen for me until I was probably in my 20s, and not early 20s. I mean, like I was mid-20s and I thought, okay, maybe buy an apartment building or something like that. So it's the mindset and the opportunity. So if you buy a house, like, okay, this is my house. Like, I'm going to live here and I'm going to pay this thing off. Like, that was the mentality that I had. Buy a house, pay it down. Buy a car, pay it off. Keep driving it until it breaks, right? Like, until the wheels fall off kind of mentality. So, what do people do to make that shift, right? It's like your grandparents own stuff, your parents own stuff, and then you come into it. Have you looked at that impact of seeing that possibility in your own mind or your eyes that, okay, well, if they did it, I could do it too? Like, have you taken that into account? Because that's what's fascinating to me is how do you make the jump? Or can you look back and go, oh, well, I can do that too and absolutely crush it?
For me, it was what that book helped with, and other things. It's not just pinned on that book. It helped me move from a spot I was comfortable, like, seeing what my parents did, seeing what my grandparents did. That book and some other things helped me move from a mindset of like maybe not being owed, but like knowing that I could do that, like what my parents did, to a standing on the shoulders kind of thing. And saying we got to take this to the next level, and like going beyond, like, hey, I know my dad and mom have this thing, and I can, when they're ready to be done or whatever, I can do that thing. It's like, one, I wasn't comfortable with that, and two, I don't want to mix words here and say something bad, but it's like it helped me.
We can edit it. Anything.
You can say whatever you want.
He'll
just helped me get to the next level, and it helped me understand that I could be, for lack of better words, financially free. Like I can get to that point, and it.
What does financial freedom even mean? There's a lot of people that through my business that I talk to that isn't even an utterance.
Or they're like, what does that mean?
That way. So
for me, financial freedom means I don't think about money. Money isn't a thing in life. It's still a transactional thing. It's not like it doesn't exist, but I just don't have to think about it.
So, like, if you want to go buy something, you can, or the monthly expenses you have for the lifestyle that you have, you don't have to worry about where your next paycheck's coming
It's
from.
more black and white like that, and I certainly don't want that to be taken as
Yeah.
like my kids can have whatever they want or anything. It's not that. It's just
No.
I want to operate the life I have and the life I enjoy, and have all the same disciplines and do what I want to. Let's make it more of a numerical thing.
Yep.
I've got this much X going out per month, and I've got more than that coming in.
Yep.
Would be financial freedom, I guess.
That's probably a better way.
A better way to put it. If you don't know me and I don't want you to take it as like, yeah, my kid can have a Corvette when he's 16.
No.
It's not that.
No, and if that's if that's the goal, then great, then that's the goal. But I think what you said for financial freedom is what's the source of that income, the source of that money, right? So are you a W-2 schmuck or are you an entrepreneur, right? I mean, like
We're gonna make some enemies with this one. I
is
think.
that what we're getting into? And I'm speaking as a guy who's done both.
Yeah.
I'm a W-2 guy. I do things on the side as well, and I think
Same. Yeah.
Dan does as well, as do you. So it's not a criticism. It's, for me, financial freedom is what you described, but the source is like coming from something I personally, Wade, am doing.
Yep.
Like somebody, like I bought this,
The
I invested this,
LLC is
I made
owned
money,
by Wade,
and
yeah.
it's mine.
Yep.
And
correct.
if you walk into your job tomorrow and they go, hey, Dan, here's a pink slip, Wade, you're fired. You go, oh, okay. I'm still making money. I'm still doing my thing.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that concept of being free up here, like, yeah, I'll do a good job and I will kick ass and make great decisions and help people. But if it doesn't work out for me, I got my own stream over here, baby. Like, I'm
Yeah.
still making money. I'm doing my thing. Doesn't change a damn thing for me.
Yeah.
And-
That's what it means to me.
And I agree with you. I've talked to a lot more people about different income streams.
Right.
Exactly what you're talking about, diversifying your income. I think you don't have to look anywhere farther than we have masks on right now to understand why diversified income is a really good idea, whether it's market and it's securities and stocks, bonds, or whatever, dividend paying stocks versus real estate versus the W-2 job you have, or any of those things. Diversifying your income, I think, allows for more financial stability, whether you're 65 or you're 25.
Right.
And it's a different mindset. It's a whole different
Yeah.
mindset. I mean, I just like you said, I remember you gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I read it in Florida when when I was down there visiting my grandparents. And I'm on the pool, and I'm not a reader. I listen to books, but I don't read them a lot. But oh my gosh, I was done with it in like a day. It was the most influential book at that point I had ever read in my entire life.
It's a total
open your mind.
mindset shift. And like when I got it, this is, God, I mean, like we should look up and see when it came out. But
Yeah.
20 years ago when I got it and, was looking at it, give or take around that time, it was kind of a conservative, entrepreneurial, like rallying cry. People that were like, all right, kind of a bootstraps mentality, get
Yeah.
investing, start doing something now. Which it still is. I mean, it might be derided or criticized now, in the chat rooms and on Reddit and all the other, kind of keyboard warriors weighing in on it. But at the time, that stuff didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, it was a book that got passed around and you read it. So for folks that are going to listen to it, if we send it out to, the real estate community, the question I had back then, I still have now, but if you're going to buy an investment grade property, how much do you have to put down? It's usually somewhere between, call it 20 and 25%. So if you buy a, $100,000 property and you have to put down 20%, what's your down payment?
Do you want me to do the math?
20 grand,
20 grand.
Yeah.
right? Where do you find 20 grand? Like, how does that work?
How'd you find it?
Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. For the first couple, I did things like cash advance off credit cards, and I had some money to get going on the first. Like,
Right.
you just got to get going, and I didn't know how to do it, and I did have a little pot of money that I saved like from being a teller at Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
It's not much. That's a hard question. It was a long time ago. I scrapped some stuff together. The second deal I did was a contract for deed, which we could get into, which was a really good beneficial thing for the people that were selling it because they could not sell the house, but I didn't have to come up with any money.
Yeah.
They just bought it on a contract for deed, and then it just kept going, and that gets into cross collateralization and how I don't really bring any money to the table anymore, and that's a 10-year process that.
But I'm talking like the first house. You're like, all right, I'm in Duluth. I want to buy a house. It's got 4 bedrooms. I know I can charge X per bedroom. It's going to be $100,000. I think for most people to get over the hump, like where do you find the 20 grand? And because that's the thing I hear all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and like my background, which I haven't talked about, I get how this stuff works, but I also know the mindset and where I was being a younger, man. I don't have a down payment for this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have cash in the bank. I don't know any,
Well, if you look at
angel investors. So like, how do you do it? Like, how do you get over the hump?
If you look at it today, I mean, 3.5% is what you can buy a 4-unit property with 3.5% down. So you get, first of all, you got to start studying.
Yep.
And you got to know, because 20 and 25%, I cringe at that.
Oh,
That's
God.
a lot of my own money that I'm throwing into it, and I like to keep all of my money out of it. So 3.5% is all you really need. So it's $3,500. So if you know the rules, and I should be careful about what I say because I'm in the industry, but come up with $3,500.
Yeah.
If it's a cash advance on a credit card, then pay it off with the rent in a couple months and stuff like that. Or, maybe you have the ability to go to a parent or something like that and say, hey, I got this plan. Here's the numbers. I need $3,500. I can pay you off in 12 months. That kind of stuff. You just creativity in real estate is really fun. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about deals now is creative structuring of deals, because I'm at a point now where I'm talking to people that want to sell. A lot of what I buy is older people selling portfolios or just one or whatever it is, and it's really fun first to pursue it, and then second to put together a deal that's mutually beneficial for both, from tax strategy from their standpoint and stuff like that. That's creativity in real estate is. We're kind of talking about the start of it, but
Yep.
once you kind of get going, you can get really creative with how you do things.
So back up though. You had talked about an outright purchase where you're putting money down, and you talked about a contract for deed. So explain why a contract for deed is different than just an outright purchase.
Well, there's a lot of at the base of it. With an outright purchase, you get title to the property and you own the home. And on a contract for deed, basically you're asking the seller, and the seller is no longer involved. The bank comes in and gives you the other portion, the 96.5% that you didn't have in the scenario that I had. And the bank
With a purchase.
with a purchase.
Yep.
And the bank comes in and you own 100% of the property, but the bank has a lien against the property.
Yep.
And you can pay that off over time or whatever. In a contract for deed situation, essentially what you're doing is the seller of the home becomes your bank. They're writing you the loan, essentially. You don't own the house. It's called a contract. The deed is the ownership of the house, so it's called a contract for the deed. So after that, it's not like, you go to get a mortgage, it's like 30 or 15 years. It's pretty structured. It's a contract. You can write anything you want onto it. So like my first one was I was buying it for pretty significantly under market value, but they couldn't sell it. And the contract for deed read we were going to put nothing down, but I had to make them payments, and they were going to make $150 a month over their mortgage payment, so they were making money. But it also read that I had to pay them off within 5 years. It's called a balloon.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a little bit of risk there, and the point is, to answer your question without getting too deep into the weeds on it, is a contract for deed. It's a contract between you and the seller. They're doing the financing. It's just a more creative way. It's usually used in today's day and age when a creative situation is needed for the sale. And bank financing is just they're going to put a lien against it. They trust you based on your credit worthiness and the structural integrity of the house and the market that the house is in, that they'll give you that $96,500, and they're going to have a first position lien against the house. So if you don't pay them, they can come take it from you. But you do own the house in that situation.
Well, and two, that's a lot of the ways where you see like Uncle Bob owns the duplex.
Yeah.
And Uncle Bob is, you go up to him and you're like, hey, I don't have $5,000 or $10,000 to put down on this thing. Is there a way that we can creatively structure this? A lot of times you see that's how it typically is done, because you can be more creative that way.
Yeah. Or you find a property you want to buy and you talk to them about renting to own, or you can there's tons of ways you can do it. Or maybe you're going to put in sweat equity for your, maybe you set up a contract for deed with a guy that you know in town that wants to get rid of his duplex, and he says, well, the whole thing needs to be painted and a couple other things need to be done. Well, I can do that, and Well, I'm going to equate that to about $5,000 in value, and
Yep.
then I'll, once you complete that, that's the first step of our contract. Now we're into a contract for deed,
Yep.
and eventually you own the house.
Here's the biggest thing, though, and this is the piece that I think is the biggest. You and I know, we all know people that have talked but have never pulled the trigger, never done anything. And the biggest thing that, Sprague, that you've done that has been so different than how many people that we've talked to is they're like, yeah, this is good, I like this, and I want to create passive income, and they read a book. 30 days later, they never talk about it. You actually had a plan from no plan, which is, from where you and I were when we graduated at whatever, 21 or 22, till now is a big difference.
Yeah.
Responsibility levels through the roof relative to what it was. But you actually put a plan in action, stayed disciplined with it, and actually did it. And now you and I had a conversation. I think we were probably on a boat ride or whatever we were doing, and you and I both said that we're 10 years from graduating and 10 years from starting these businesses. I should say 12 or 13 years from graduating, whatever. We're not that young anymore. But starting these businesses and doing this stuff, and we're now at the point where it feels like it's all paying off, and it's really starting to snowball.
Yeah, and real estate. I really enjoyed kind of teaching about real estate investing and stuff like that, but it definitely is it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's a slow grind. Like, I'm 10 years into it, and I'm truly just now starting to be like, okay, this is working, and so.
And that was the basis for my question. Is I think that there are some false assumptions, misconceptions, like red herrings that, well, I can't buy an investment property and have a house because I got to put down 20%. The truth is, stop talking about it and go do something.
Yep.
And go figure it out.
Yep.
There are tons of different ways to do it.
Banks want to lend money right now. Interest rates are at basically rock bottom lows relative to history.
Go figure it out and find out. Just don't make an assumption that you don't have the wherewithal to do it. I don't care if your parents are rich or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want to do something, go do it. For, like my grandpa, was from Palestine. He, was an immigrant, came here as like a 17-year-old, 20-year-old college student. They called them land contracts, right? So like contract for deed, same thing. Mm-hmm. All right, dude, you want this building? He's like, yeah. You make the payments, it's yours, and you got it.
Yep.
When you stop making the payments, I'm gonna take it back.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that's how he got started.
Yeah.
Didn't know the language, couldn't speak. You figured it out, and he got his first building, and which he kept all that stuff for himself, which is good for him. But that's how he started. No bank, no anything, and like when I'm at 22, 24, getting out of college, doing law school, I'm like, how did you do all this stuff?
He did it.
And he's like,
He just started.
He just started. And he's like,
Yep.
You want to buy something? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, who owns it? John Doe. He's like, go talk to John Doe.
Yeah, call him.
Seriously.
Yeah.
He's like, ask him. He's like,
Ask him if he wants to have lunch and if you can pay for it.
I want to buy this. And like, how can you make that happen? And I'm like, is that how you started your thing? He's like, yeah, pretty much. And he's like, well, no, actually, the city of Chicago was looking for people to come in and like rehab buildings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I can get all the asbestos out of this building.
Yeah.
Like, all right, if you can do that job, you can have it.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And I was like, what'd you know about asbestos? He's like,
Nothing.
jack shit, nothing. Like, I didn't know anything.
Yep.
He's like, but I figured it out. And then it started.
Yep.
So like, I'm kind of like not being coy, but I wanted to see what the response was, because it's not the same. Put your down payment, and then you have that for a few years, and you borrow some equity from that property and buy the next one. You don't have to do it that way. There are tons of ways to do it.
Yep.
Which kind of makes me mad about all the books coming out and all like the infomercials at night about like, you can buy 40 properties and you can flip them and rehab them. There's a method to the madness, but it's not as heavy as it might seem. Like,
Yep.
save 50 grand, then buy properties. There are tons of ways to do it.
And the biggest thing is there's a million different ways, just like you had said, in the action of actually doing it.
Yeah.
And you'll learn so much. You've said this. You learn so much on your first deal that the second one is half as hard.
Yeah.
And the next one is exponentially easier than the first one was. And now, like you said, at this point, you showed me your spreadsheet on what you do. You plug in the numbers, and you showed me that, and I was impressed. I'm like, this you have a system down on what you're buying and why and how the numbers work and what you're looking for, and to me that's impressive.
It's discipline.
Yep.
You can, yeah, it's like a lot of, you can reduce your, the way it goes now, I mean, you can just reduce your risk a lot by staying in it. There's not really a question there, but yeah, I'm just kind of reaffirming what you guys are saying, and it's...
So you said risk. I'd like to go back to this. So in my professional life, I deal with people in a lot of market securities. I deal with a lot of real estate as well. But most people consider risk as like conservative, moderate, aggressive, 401ks, that type of thing, where they look at real estate and they think, oh my gosh, that's like so risky. Like, explain to me risk in real estate, risk in, versus other risk that people understand, like maybe the 401ks or something like that.
Oh, I'm one-sided on that.
Well, that's what I want to hear. That's why I
I don't know, because I don't want to say, like, to somebody listening that if you've never bought one that it's not risky. It's super risky. What I'm saying is I've got a system where I can reduce the risk to an extremely tolerable level where I pretty much know what's going to happen with the property.
That's why they have engagements. You just don't get married right away.
Yeah.
You're reducing the risk to an extremely tolerable level.
Yeah, trying to find the crazy
Yeah,
bad word.
it works across the spectrum.
It's the
probably
same
works,
thing,
yeah, It
Oh,
doesn't stop there. It's
And just as a
it's like
brief...
measure twice, cut once.
Right, it's the same thing. I wore my fishing bobber socks for you guys today.
That's special, Wade.
So if you see
And your red shoes.
there's a bobber there, and you probably can't see it on the camera, but there's a bobber on this. And I wore that for you guys because I know you guys are insane for that kind of
So
stuff.
Fishing nerds.
This to me explains why real estate investing, to me, and why the market should tell you why real estate investing is not risky. What's the only investment that if somebody's got some money laying around and they want to start investing, what's the only thing that you can invest in, to a degree, and borrow money to do it? It's real estate.
Yep.
So you go to a bank and say, hey, I want a $100,000 loan to speculate on gold or to buy stocks and day trade. They're going to say no.
They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
So
whoa, whoa.
that should define how much risk is in real estate right there. Banks are willing to lend 97% against it, or if it's investment property, 25%, 75% loan to value, but they're willing to be the main risk taker in the entire transaction. That right there tells you the market is defining how risky real estate is. It's not very risky. People need roofs over their heads. It's been so.
Which is funny now because I don't need to go to like the shop downtown to buy X, but people still need a place to live, and so that that I think that's what you're kind of getting
Or
at.
just imagine Florida in 08 and 09. It's like, yeah, the market fell apart and prices fell, but people still needed a place to live. So if you just calm down, and if you're a buy and hold investor down there, well, if you still got it, it's worth more than it was in 07.
Well, and if you buy it right with the right numbers, doing the right due diligence, the value. Let's say for easy math, you buy it at $100,000, which is not realistic, but you buy it at $100,000. Let's say the value goes down to $60,000. But if you're cash flowing that,
Who cares?
You're paying the bank, and you might be making some money, or you might not. But if you're just paying the bank and you just wait that out, well, now the thing's worth $150,000 or $200,000 today.
So I wanted to expand on that, like to kind of see the other side of it. So the market's telling you how risky real estate is, and I think it's a pretty good indicator. I mean, it's worldwide, people lend money against real estate and just become lien holders. The other side of that is why probably my number one reason for investing in real estate and how fast it can accelerate wealth is the fact that banks will lend against it, and you have leverage.
Yep.
So the illustration that I'm trying to develop and try to share with people, if I get to teach them about, it's imagine in the winter you're working on your car, and let's say you got to take your battery out or something, and there's one of those nuts that you have to take off, and it's frozen and rusty, and you take your wrench and you try to turn it, barely moves, or you can't get it to turn at all. Well, in that situation, I go find a pipe, and I put it on the end of the wrench, and then I push out here. And what are you doing? You're getting further away from the fulcrum.
Leverage.
And you're getting more leverage, and you can move it further with more pressure.
Yep.
So let's do a case study on real estate and how that kind of commingles with that. Let's say John Doe in Mankato has $10,000. Let's use some easy numbers to invest, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. Okay, let's say he wants to buy gold. Okay, say he holds it for a year and it appreciates by $5,000. I'm sorry, 5%.
Yep.
5%. You get to the end of that 12 months and you've made $500. I like every dollar that comes my way, but that's not game-changing money.
No.
It's not how fast I want to grow. Okay? Well, John Doe goes to the bank and says, hey, I've got $10,000. I'm really interested in investing in real estate. And he finds a $100,000 property, to keep the numbers interesting, and the bank gives him $90,000 as a lien. What did they just effectively just hand him? A pipe for leverage.
Yep.
Okay, so that same deal, same $10,000, let's say it's the same rate of return at 5%. Okay, he's way away from the fulcrum, and now it's 5,000 instead of 500. So that's the core of why I like real estate. Is you got more pressure out here because you're using leverage, and you can move your wealth so fast. So essentially, the rusty nut is like the idea of you wanting to invest, and the wrench in this situation is like buying gold, and it's like, sure, you moved a little bit, but it didn't do that much. Well, the pipe is the bank loan, and now you're out here moving a lot further, $5,000 versus 500, and if you just expunge that over multiple purchases, and the fact that the bank will, as you become less of a risk, they'll actually let you borrow more money against properties all the way up to 100% loan to value, so you're leveraged at 100%.
As long as they're covered on the back end with your other stuff,
you can really, really snowball your wealth in an uphill direction. Snowball's not the right word.
Yep, I get it.
But you get what I'm saying.
But yeah,
that the core of that is the one. If you had to ask me one reason why real estate investing is good, it's the acceleration of wealth and how fast you can build wealth
Relative to putting $10,000 in the market,
Yeah.
making 5%, and then starting over making 5%, and then the next year you lose 4%.
Even if you make
Then
a 100% return.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, you got 20 grand. It's all good.
Yep.
But put it in real estate, and not to mention with real estate, to further that point, we haven't even talked about the passive income you got for that 12 months.
Yep.
Yep.
You got a $100,000 property. Let's say it's in Mankato here. The numbers aren't going to exactly match up if you check my work here, but let's say it's $675 a month for rent. Well, that bar you have, the getting away from the fulcrum, the bank loan is payment. So let's say that's you got taxes, insurance, stuff like that. So let's say you're breaking in $200 a month. Well, still that's passive cash flow that you have that you don't get. You don't get a dividend from gold or anything like that, or just anything like that. So it's just another piece of the puzzle.
And that doesn't mean
So
that
you
you
get
have
the
to do one or
appreciation.
the other. It just means that using them in conjunction can be like you still have a 401k.
I do.
Yes, but it's not your main driver for your business, but you're using those in conjunction.
And what I'm just saying is, from the standpoint of John Doe in our example, of somebody who wants to hey, I got 10 grand or 20 or 50 or 100, doesn't matter. All the numbers are ratio driven. They all make sense. If it's just somebody who is deciding what he wants to start in, I'm sure there's more risk with real estate, and there's more risk, more reward, but it's just a good visualization, I think, of that rusty nut, and you just got a wrench, but let's put that, let's get further away from the fulcrum with leverage. And that's what real estate is to me.
in which is a good time to point out. I think Rusty Nut was one of the names we considered for this podcast. And now that I've heard it a couple of times, I'm not sure we made the right decision.
Change it.
Welcome to the Rusty Nut podcast. we are the
use
wrench.
leverage.
We use leverage.
We're not a small wrench. We use a pipe.
Big pipe, big wrench, leverage, Rusty Nut. But no, I think that for me, it's always getting back to recognizing if I have lost the forest for the trees. Like for me, I always think back, man. Am I thinking the same way that I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And am I talking in a way that people can understand? We're like, well, don't you know the same stuff that I do, or don't we read the same stuff? And for real estate, because I'm not that bright, I like the fact that I can see it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That kind of helps the thing along for me. Mm-hmm. I can see it. I can touch it. I can walk into it. Yep. I can drive by it. Mm-hmm. And if I see something that I want to buy or that I currently own, I'm sorry, it makes me feel good. Uh-huh. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, that's our building right there, boys. You see that? Yeah, we bought that, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I also like the fact that you can sell it, and it can be bought and sold multiple times. Like my wife says, so how many times do you think our house has been purchased and sold? And it's from 1978. And I'm like, well, based on average home ownership from 78, which is 42, 43 years, somebody has bought and sold that property probably 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. And when we sell it, that cycle continues. I like that aspect of it tremendously. Mm-hmm. And you can also improve it and all these other Like I said, like you're financial stockbroker, smart guy, that kind of thing. I like.
Why are you laughing at smart guy?
Well, his own son said on episode 2, he's like, my dad's bad at math. Everybody knows
Mental math. I can handle calculators.
But like the fact that I can go pick up something or drywall or wood or get a new furnace, I like that kind of stuff. I'd like to be able to go do it.
To further your point a little bit, it's empowering to be like, if on any of my stuff, if I feel like I've had a non-productive day, this can be on your primary residence too. It's like, well, I'm going to go hang that sheetrock, or if the project's not started, I'm going to go tear the sheetrock off the wall.
Exactly.
I have to just make a physical step and do something.
Right.
And you can with that kind of stuff.
My portfolio jumped by 3% today. I know that matters. It means something. It's real money. It's real dollars. But for what actually makes sense for, like kind of audio, like visual sensory experience as a human being, that's huge for me.
Tactile contact. You can go touch the thing.
And I find people that like real estate, there's a kind of a common thread. They all kind of like that stuff too.
Yep.
They like to touch it and see it and feel it and prove it. And so if you like those kinds of things, it's a great vehicle to use.
Well, and not even that when you're talking about buying and selling. So with investment real estate, you can use, it's not the technical term, but a real estate rollover.
Yeah.
So if you buy it for $100,000, it goes up to $200,000. Instead of you having to pay taxes on it, you can do it the right way, and which we're not going to get into. But you then can roll the entire thing over, and not have to pay gains on that sale, and move them over to the next property.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that they have an entire portfolio that they've done that on each property a couple of different times,
Over and over again. Yeah.
and then you die.
We haven't even gotten into tax advantages,
No.
which we probably won't.
And then you get it, and then you die, and you give it to, let's say, your kids, and now the taxes are completely wiped away.
Yeah, their basis steps completely up, at least on this tax code, yeah.
Yep. So as of the recording of this,
Yeah.
I don't think that's changed today. But
Nope. 100% of the basis back.
so you talk about the tax advantages. So what is a tax advantage to either making a W-2 dollar or making a real estate dollar?
The biggest, to keep it as simple as possible, the biggest tax advantage for real estate is depreciation, which
Yeah.
is a non-cash a non-cash way to write things off. They allow you to depreciate the building. I'd have to ask my buddy Brad, is it 27 and a half years?
That's
over
correct.
27 and a half
Yep.
years.
27 and a half years.
Even though you might be improving the building or the building's been sitting there for 100 years, you get to depreciate it and take a non-cash loss
Yep.
on the balance sheet, and that is probably the biggest
It's huge. Yeah.
hack.
Well,
It's not a hack. It's a
You have things. All you're doing is taking advantage of the tax code. You have things like depreciation, cost segregation, or you can write off the interest that you're paying on the
mortgage.
debt that you have, the mortgage
Yeah.
on the property.
There's a certain amount of mortgage interest you can write off and all that kind of stuff. I think that never made sense to me until somebody said, "Hey, like if you buy a new furnace for your property, for your investment grade property, is the furnace worth, the same amount every year?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, well, if you bought it for $5,000 this year, is it worth less next year? And the year after that, and the year after that? Let's say 20 years in the future, is that furnace still worth $5,000? And I'm like, well, no, because you've used it. And they're like, that's depreciation.
Yep.
And for clarification for anyone listening, if somebody buys that house from you though,
Yeah.
they get all of it back.
They can just start like
They just start
right.
over. Even if the property's 100 years old, you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about if you don't get depreciation.
You got it.
It's your depreciation now.
Yeah.
So
And the tax laws are the tax advantageous laws are because exactly what you said. People need
Yep.
to have roofs over their heads.
You
the
got
government is very interested in keeping housing at the front of their mind, and what's the word I'm looking for? They're very interested in keeping good housing and keeping
Incentivizing
good
it.
neighborhoods and keep good communities together and
Yep.
keeping housing good.
Yep.
So
They care about it, and it is of national interest and national security. They're not very good at it, but they do care about it,
Yeah.
and they try to do the best they can. It's a hard problem to solve, but it's not going to stop.
No.
I mean, it's going to be there.
I mean, what's the biggest thing? You know exactly. What's the biggest reason why people don't hop into it, other than like they have to learn some stuff or whatever
into real estate?
into real estate? Wonder if
I-
you're going to get where I'm going here.
Oh man, just fear of failure. I don't know, fear of getting off the couch. Just
Is it barrier to entry kind of thing? Is that where you're going?
So when I say this, you'll know exactly where this is coming from. Is okay. Well, I can't find the right deal, or I just it's not a 20% discount from market value, and well, I can't find this, and it's not like not finding the perfect deal or being super stringent
Sure.
on all of that.
oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that should be clear from anybody coaching on real estate is that you're
Or the
not gonna,
prices are too high, or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's if you're buying your first one, you shouldn't expect to get a 20% under market deal. On your first one, you should be looking to learn more than you should be looking to make a ton of money or anything like
yeah.
that. And you should just, this is getting into advice, but I mean, buying a market deal is not bad for your first property.
And it's not bad if it cash flows. If it satisfies the bank,
Right.
you have the correct
There's a
debt
lot more to
service
the answer
coverage.
than just
That's more technical than maybe we want to get. But if you have enough money coming in to cover the debt and have the extra cushion that the bank wants,
Yep.
I mean, to me, you just need to get your feet wet. You dive in and you figure out how to swim.
Yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves is you look at people and they, to extend this conversation a little further, is they find a deal and let's say it's like a 5% under market deal, or I consider it a good deal, and that's just they find it and they still have to get less than that. They have to get the deal for less than that. It's like if you got to strike. Real estate's hot, has been for a long time, and if you find a deal, you have to strike and you have to take it. So
Yeah, for me, man, it's like your example with, it's 5% under market, but they still want to, try and squeeze more blood out of the turnip. I think of Tommy Boy and Chris Farley when he grabs his little pet.
Yeah.
Remember that scene?
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Where she's like,
Naughty pad.
naughty, you're naughty, you're naughty, and then he just goes, "Ugh," and just he goes
Kill the
crazy.
deal.
He just kills the deal, and he's like, and I just, oh, there goes my sale. People do that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, man, like I forget the punchline, but she's like, wow, you're really mental.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll fire those fryers back up for you. And he's like, oh, thanks, Gladys. We need to get to that point of getting over ourselves to go and do it and like figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's an article that came out, it's Invention Bar Magazine in Minnesota. It's the cover article, and it's the reluctant landlord, meaning I didn't buy my first piece of real estate for the purpose that I have now.
Yep.
Like it was something I had to manage and like deal with. It's my first house, still have it. It's a townhome. It's in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I bought it in like 2005. And, things happen. You guys remember the Great Recession, right?
Yeah.
So I still have that damn property. And so I had to move and come to Mankato, and I couldn't sell it, and all these things. That's my first investment property. It was something that I said, I can't foreclose on this. I can't walk away from it. I can't keep a law license and have crappy credit and all these things, right?
Yep.
So like I can't leave this deal. So I got forced into being this landlord, or the reluctant landlord.
Yeah, another way it's described as accidental landlord. A lot of people become accidental landlords.
I'm an accidental landlord, but what it did is it opened me up to doing all these other things. It was by force, but it happened. So I confess, I don't know that I would have done it, and like I'm a real estate type of person, and my dad's a real estate broker, and my grandpa did real estate. I'm a real estate attorney, for Pete's sake. Even me, I had to be like forced into doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because it's not where you're taught.
It's
Just like we
you're
were
not
talking about on the last episode with Bob. It's like you're taught to get a good education, go get a job,
Right.
Buy a house, have a 401k, and a dog. And like that's what you're taught. This is opposite of a lot of that. You don't get taught how to run an analysis on debt service coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a history and philosophy student up at UMD, and now just from my training through real estate, which is all self-taught, you and I can sit and talk about real estate, not because I've been trained on it or have a degree in it. It's because it's not that difficult. I mean, the first time I heard, and I say this all the time, it's debt service coverage. I love that word because once you hear it, it's all of a sudden, it's, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? But once you understand it, it's like, well, that's easy. It's just, do you have enough money to pay your debt? each month
Yeah.
coming in for rent.
For every
it's
dollar
not
that you
hard.
put out, what do you have coming in?
Yeah,
That's it?
Yeah, that's
pretty
it.
much.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
give or
like
take.
your mortgage coverage. You have more income than you do to pay your mortgage on your home. So it's not that difficult, and that's what Rich Dad Poor Dad was so interested. That's why I found it so interesting.
Same. Yeah.
Because I'm not that smart, but reading that book, I'm like, dude, this is just a get rich slow scheme on just doing this stuff and learning from your mistakes and
That's
just
when you ask me
buying
what Rich
assets.
Dad Poor Dad was about. The thesis of the entire he talks about the education system in that a lot too, and how it's failing some people, which we won't get in. But it's the difference between an asset and a liability, and to this day, it's still. It actually the place we lived at 608 Woodland too, up in Duluth, a very crappy house. I'm not afraid to say that, and I'm paying $425 a month for the. And there's 6 bedrooms in that place, and it was the first thing that I went like, oh, this is how much it would cost to own something like this, and the rent coming in is more than that.
Yep.
And it's just like that's all it took. Light bulb, let's
Yep.
go, because I couldn't think of any widget where there was no widget I could build
man.
and sell.
Like you guys are boys, and I wanted to make sure you had some time to connect in the beginning of the podcast. I could not, for the life of me, think of something to build either. Like I'm gonna build a pop socket, or I'm gonna build X, Y, or Z, or I'm gonna invent something.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Taco tape was my thing.
You know what I mean?
I wanted to invent edible tape
Right.
that you could
Like-
shut a taco with. I shouldn't say that on here. I could probably still do it.
I just couldn't do
It's
it.
the edible adhesive.
I forgot I forgot all
I'm
about
like-
that.
I would buy taco tape.
Oh my gosh, I forgot all about
Sorry.
that. Delete
But-
that part,
Yeah.
Tony. That's confidential information.
But I mean, think about it. You're like, if you build something and run something, and you're like, oh, okay. And then you see things like the Swiffer or whatever the product is, and I'm like, I don't know how did OtterBox become a thing?
I didn't even know how to trade I didn't even know what skills I had to trade in like a W-2 market.
Right,
I didn't
I have
even
no
know
idea.
I was like, okay,
Yep.
I was a teller at that point
Yeah.
because that's, you get a teller job in college, and my mom happened to work at Wells Fargo. And I was just going there and doing it, and I'm glad I did. I learned a ton of things, and that's what you do. You get out in the world and you learn things. But there was a point where I was just like, I had no idea what I can go trade my whatever value I have for money. I was like trying to figure out that, and it's just the first thing that clicked.
Same for me. I'm like, I don't know. It's like,
Were you
Well-
just like, should I just go to law school?
right, or should I go to law school or college, or I want to get a finance degree or whatever it is? Or you go, why is that guy so damn rich? And you're like, he invented Redken conditioner. And you're like, that dude made conditioner? That's why he's worth $25 million? Yeah, apparently people like that bottle. I don't know. He did it like
It's true.
he did it in 1972. You're like, oh, that's cool. What'd that guy do? He was pissed off that his pontoon boat was floating around, so he made these pontoon legs. What? That dude?
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure out what that was.
Yeah.
100%.
He put 5 blades on his razor.
Yeah.
Or,
Therefore,
Change the game.
Mr. Gillette or
right.
whatever his name
And you're
is.
like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Or like, man, that's a ripoff. I'm going to go to the Dollar Shave Club or, Henry's, which please sponsor. But, and you can get
Henry's rocks.
you can get a razor for $2. That's probably wrong, but it's not like 50 from the big razor companies. I couldn't figure out how to square that up. But I can buy that building for X, and I can get this, and I pay everybody, and I keep some money for myself. That made sense to me.
Yep.
And it's mutually beneficial all the way through.
Yeah, if you
Which
do a
is-
good job and good
yeah.
landlord and everything.
And that, it's I don't want to say I had a vision because I kind of did it by the seat of my pants, but definitely one of the visions now is like, I don't know how to say it, but opposite of slumlord, like quality housing that is at a mid-range. I don't want to say, you can't say like super quality housing and like super affordable. Like the focus is like
If it's a
really nice
nicer place,
housing
you can
at a
charge more.
mid-range point.
Yeah.
And if you just there's people making money at the high range point, there's people making at the slumlord, and I just chose that, and that's what we're doing.
Well, and I think too that the risk is different.
Yeah, it is.
So you look at like A+ new construction apartments in downtown Austin. It's like, yeah, that you could do that, but all of a sudden COVID hits, or you have
Right.
overbuilt, or whatever it is, or you have a population change or something. It's like people aren't willing to maybe pay $2,800 a month for an apartment, but they will be willing to pay $1,200 a month for an apartment.
Where's the balance?
Where's the balance? And I think you've
And this
talked
was
about that.
this is part of like the things that go through me and my business partner Matt Carney's heads is like it's another piece of reducing
Yep.
the risk overall. It's like, okay, well, we're not putting ourselves way out on an island with these top end units.
Yep.
You know, we feel like we have a product that people like now, and a product that there's people that could fall back
Yep.
to if times get tough.
You have options.
And there's
Yeah,
already
know.
tenants there. It's not like it's brand new construction or anything like that. Not that brand new construction is bad, but there's just a different risk appetite or a different risk tolerance there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
different people, different lives, different everything. I mean, it's more just picking one thing and just focusing on it.
Yep.
And
That's what my father-in-law did. I mean, which is crazy. So, like my wife, if she's from a small town in Platteville, Wisconsin, go Pioneers, and he was a kid basically, and that's just what he did. He went to the bank. This is like way before our time. We weren't even alive. Like, this is 45 years ago. He went
you were
to the.
almost alive.
It's close.
Close.
It's
You're pretty close. You're pretty close to alive, Wade.
I'm 39, So he went to the bank, like kind of a Main Street bank, and goes, I want to buy a property. And they're like, okay, which one? He's like, this one. And they're like, all right, go buy it. He went in and he circled like 12 properties he wanted to buy. He was just going to buy a new one every month, which you could do back then because they were like $8,000 or $6,000 at the time, right? So he still has a ton of those properties, and that's how he retired.
All he did was make a decision.
That's it.
Yes.
And the world bent to him. Like,
Bam.
It's
Seriously.
if you make a decision, you go to the bank with. If you've made that decision, you're going to walk in with a different aura about you and confidence. And damn, this kid can do it.
And
banking was a lot different back then.
It was, but still,
Yeah.
it's still, there's a lesson there. I mean, it's not,
It's a
He
it's
did
a
it.
mindset change. It's no different than like what's a good example? If you let's say you're looking at a new car, and all of a sudden you kind of look, it's like, hey, I kind of really like that car. Now you're driving around, you haven't noticed that car, but
Oh, yeah.
it seems like you see that car every other vehicle driving down the road.
Yeah, and that
It
car
It was
in
there the whole
Mankato,
time. You
and there-
just didn't see it. And this is exactly the same thing. Is now you look at these properties, it's like that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Like all this around you is happening. You just weren't aware of it.
there are two cars like that in Mankato. One is a Honda Pilot. They're everywhere. And the other one is either a black or white GMC, Chevy, Suburban, Sierra, Snell motor, shiny, big vehicle. It's like those are the two.
Yeah.
And then just in case my mother-in-law watches this far into the podcast, I have just a tiny bit of cleanup work to do. My father-in-law did do that, but he was married to my mother-in-law, Karen. She also played a huge part in that too. So it wasn't like he walked in there by himself, and she was a nurse and had a good job and all that kind of stuff. So they did it together.
Yep.
But it was
Cleanup.
something he wanted to do. So there's my cleanup. So Karen, he didn't do it alone, or like he was like a,
Tony
like
put a disclaimer in there at the bottom. It's like, Wade will clean this up later.
right. So
If you don't watch the
wasn't
whole
like,
podcast, you can't be mad.
right. So if you don't watch the whole thing, you'll be mad. So, but anyway, that's what they did, and that's what they do. They're in their late 60s, mid 60s now, and they still have it
Yeah.
all these years later.
The other piece to finish that I just thought of on the real estate thing is when I was in Duluth, and the things that were motivating me, and like when the gears first started turning, is the person I was handing that check to, let's call it $425, was like an 85-year-old guy.
Yeah.
And I talked to him because I'm sure I did something wrong at the property, but I'm talking to him.
It was
and
probably me.
It came up that he started doing it when he was 60. And he was really excited about all these properties he had and how
Yeah.
much money he was making. And I was just like, well, if you started doing it when you're 60 and you're rich at 85 or whatever he is, wealthy, it's like, well, why not start when I'm 21?
Yeah.
Was what I thought.
That's one of the biggest regrets that I have. Is
But the key
just
to that
buy
whole
stuff.
thing is why not start when you're 31 or 41
Yeah.
or 50? Just start.
Just start. Just
Yeah.
do it.
What's the favorite? It might be Kiyosaki, but he always talks about the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy.
Yeah,
He didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was like 60.
yeah.
I'm probably wrong there,
But still, it like wasn't. So he's 45 or 65. But if 60 is 60, I don't know. Like run the tables. That seems like it's probably on the later end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a regret that I have because if you just start doing it at the time, I mean, like I have buddies, and Dan, like some of the same people. These guys are not 40, they're around my age. They have 50 frickin' properties, and they collect $2 or $3 million in rents per year.
Gross.
Gross, yeah. But still, that number is indicative of something.
Yeah.
And guess what happens when they pay their 20-year notes off?
Yeah.
Then
It's just cake, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, geez, this guy's idiot, stupid law school, shit about properties. So, I mean, seriously, to see it happen, and that's why, I started, I'm not, like the Colonel, but I started at the time I did. But, like I said, you grow up with a certain mindset. And we talked about it with Marissa,
Yep.
and it was kind of entrepreneurial, being around that kind of thinking
Yep.
is huge because I wasn't around that. Like my grandpa was doing stuff in Chicago. I wasn't around him. So I have no idea that he's doing stuff like that.
Yep.
I found it on my own, but that mindset is freaking huge to
Yep.
see somebody going, oh, I can do that,
Yeah.
and I can do my own thing. And like, if you want to back into a number and say, I would like to make $100,000 a year on my own, like doing my thing, you can back into real estate that way.
Yep.
And go, this, and it's not that hard. This property makes me $400 a month. Okay, cool. Start there. And then it builds. Now I'm making $3,000 a month and $5,000 and so on. That financial freedom.
Yep.
Agreed.
So what else do we want to talk about, Dan? I never call you Dan.
So Colonel Sanders sold his first restaurant at 65.
There you go.
Okay, so
Nice.
Tony just told us, if you can't hear, Colonel Sanders sold his first restaurant, sold it at the age of 65, which is pretty close to the age I am now, evidently.
You are getting old, though. It's been not.
I didn't
you
come here to
look
talk
good, though.
about that, but it came up.
Jesus.
But you look good. We were just talking about beforehand how you're down a few pounds and you're excited about that.
You
It's
got more hair than me.
easier on
You
my
got that
joints.
going for you.
It's easier on
You
my
got quite the
joints.
flow. You got quite the flow there. You should actually do like a little bit longer in the back and do like a Morgan Wallen type of deal and just like really let it flow out. That's what I would do.
I would, but corporate America, all that kind of stuff, you can't.
And then the paper thin mustache.
Pencil
Pencil thin.
Pencil
Yeah.
thin.
Wade showed up to the first. Wasn't it the first one?
First meeting, yeah.
First meeting, yeah, and he takes his mask and like quickly just dips it down. He shows me this pencil thin top lip mustache.
It was
Like,
pretty
dude,
gnarly.
Thing's awesome.
I can't even grow a pencil thin thing of hair over my top of my head.
Yeah, but you can grow a giant ass real estate business. So I guess if you're gonna swap one, I'd pick yours.
I'd rather have the real
Yeah.
estate.
I'm good without the hair. Wear hats now.
No, so I think I can tell that we're kind of coming to a close, right?
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on to the Soulman podcast, which is conversations we would have had anyway.
Well, we forgot to say that at the beginning.
And so it's conversations we would have had anyway, but are so thankful that we get to do and record and have for posterity.
Yeah.
What do you have going on? I know you get the real estate and the banking job and a third kid on the way.
That sums it up.
Okay. And
Do you have anything to promote?
I'm about to bust into a semi-amateur bass fishing career
okay.
in tournaments. I mean, that's another podcast.
So if Pelican Coolers wants to sponsor and wrap your boat, you're okay with that?
No, like I said at the beginning, it's hang out with the family, watch. I'm big into Maverick hockey. Maverick hockey is awesome, and then tournament fish. I like anything competitive, so I can't just fish. I want to tournament fish.
Yep.
Big into that, and
Well, I picked up during the podcast that you're kind of a laid back kind of guy, not terribly competitive. So I'm not surprised you want to go on a semi professional bass fishing career. But will you come back? I know you guys are friends and neighbors and like know each other through and through. If we have a hockey
I was
podcast,
just going to say that. Yep.
will you come back and do one? But I'd like to get like the East coach or the West coach to be here at the same time. And maybe
I
help
know
the-
more than both of them, so we don't
Yeah.
really even need them. But
Well,
So,
a little bit of a
you know
just
what I
like
mean?
a little teaser is we've been in conversations with some people, some hockey people. We just won't even name them yet because we'll have to have them for sure on the schedule. But we're looking to do a hockey podcast, and more specifically, I'd love to do a Maverick hockey podcast, and
Yeah.
then do a different hockey one too as well.
I would love to be there for that. So if you come back and do that one, you can try to hold back your enthusiasm for the team up north.
one thing I did want to
I'll
say.
do that. We'll do a Bulldog one.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to say, which, it's towards the end of the podcast here, so see who's still listening, but one thing that has just blown me away, I've been doing it for a decade and gotten relatively bigger over the last 3 to 5 years here. No one ever reaches out to me and asks any questions, period. So, like, if
Okay.
anybody's watching this, like, it's Daniel Sprague on Facebook, like, message me. I love talking about real estate. I can count on one hand how many people have reached out to me, and asked me one question about real estate investing, which is kind of scary. It just speaks to how people don't get started.
Yep.
Because the way to get started is to seek someone out who's doing it and talk to them.
And they do it all the time, and they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Find a mentor.
Anybody who, if you contact me and say you want to go get coffee or a beer, I'll meet you and I'll talk to real estate. Talk real estate with you.
So big thanks again. Soul Men Podcast, conversations we would have had anyway. Daniel Joseph Sprague, our real estate investor coach. Thanks for being here and doing it. It was a lot of fun. I feel this was the most technical one, and I'm proud of that we got a little nerdy.
That's okay.
And
we are nerdy.
And so that's what it is. So please come back for the hockey one. And a really big thanks for making it happen. I know you're busy, so
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
tip of the hat.
everyone else.